If I had not started bringing my night driver a cup of tea every single week, I would have opened my own front door that night and never made it to morning. I am Ruth Whitfield. I am 58 years old, and this is my true story from Cleveland, Ohio. 2 years before that night, I buried my husband Walter after a stroke took him into space an afternoon. We had been married 31 years. He drove a delivery route for a furniture company. I kept the books for a small dental office on the east side. When he died, there was no big insurance payout, no cushion, just a mortgage that did not care that I was grieving in a house that suddenly felt 3 sizes too large for one person. I sold the car we could not afford to keep and started taking rides instead, which is how, 8 months later, I found myself standing outside a 24-hour billing call center at 11 o'clock at night, waiting for a stranger to come pick me up. I had taken the job because it paid $2 more an hour than anything during the day, and because nights meant I did not have to come home to an empty house while the sun was still up, mocking me with all that light and nowhere to put it. My shift ran from 3 in the afternoon until 11 at night. The buses stopped running our route at 10. My son Marcus lived 2 states away with a wife and a new baby, and a life that did not have room in it for worrying about his mother's commute. So I downloaded the app he had set up for me before he left, and I started riding home with strangers in the dark. That is how I met Gideon. The first night, I almost did not get in the car. It was an old gray sedan with a dent in the back bumper, parked under a streetlight that buzzed like it was thinking about giving out. The driver looked to be somewhere in his 60s, broad-shouldered, quiet, with the kind of stillness some men only get after they have survived something. His rating was near perfect. I told myself that meant something and climbed into the back seat. He did not try to make conversation on that first ride, and I liked him for it. He asked only for my address and then drove, glancing at me twice in the mirror, not out of suspicion. I would learn later, but out of habit. Long shift, he said, more statement than question. Every night, I told him. He nodded like a man filing something away. Over the following weeks, something strange and comforting happened. Gideon kept showing up. Not every single ride, but often enough that I started to recognize the hum of his engine before I saw the headlights. He remembered that I liked the radio low. He remembered which nights I came out slower, more tired, and did not press me to talk on those. He noticed when my hands were shaking from the cold, and one night, without being asked, he had the heat already running before I even got in. In late September, I started bringing him tea. It began as an accident, really. I had made a thermos for myself, and only drunk half of it by the time he pulled up. I poured the rest into the lid, and held it out to him before I had even thought it through. He looked at the cup, then at me, like he was deciding whether to accept something bigger than tea. He took it. From then on, I made 2 cups every night I worked, one for me, one for him, chamomile most nights, sometimes meant when my stomach was unsettled from the stress of the books not balancing at work. By November, those 15-minute rides had become the only real conversation I had with another human being most days. Gideon told me, slowly, over several nights, that he had spent 22 years as a private security contractor, mostly night shifts guarding warehouses and record storage facilities, until a knee injury ended that career 2 years earlier. Driving nights let him keep the hours he was used to and kept him close to his daughter, who worked the overnight shift at a hospital not far from my house and needed someone to check on her apartment while she was at work. So the man had once followed her home from that same hospital and never fully left her feeling safe again. He did not tell me this to frighten me. He told it the way you tell someone a fact about your own life you have made peace with. But it meant that Gideon noticed things other drivers would not. He noticed a car that did not belong on my street. He noticed a man who lingered too long by a mailbox. And one night, 3 weeks before everything changed as we turned onto my block, he slowed the car and said quietly, "That same truck has been parked there the last 4 nights." I laughed it off. I told him Cleveland had plenty of trucks that never moved. He did not argue. He only nodded and kept driving, but he did not look away from it in the mirror until we had passed. What I did not know then was that Gideon had already started writing things down. At the billing office, something had been building for months that I had barely registered as dangerous. I processed insurance claims and adjustments, mostly for elderly patients and people on fixed incomes, and over the late summer I had started noticing small discrepancies. A claim closed out at a different amount than what was submitted. A patient file marked resolved with no record of who resolved it. My supervisor, a tired, careful woman named Denise, pulled me aside in October and asked me to start quietly tracking every adjustment that came through a particular login, one that was not supposed to be active after regular office hours. Nothing dramatic, she said. Just keep notes. I did not think much of it. I certainly did not think it had anything to do with a man parked outside my house in a gray pickup truck. Gideon thought differently. He had, without me realizing it, started driving a second regular passenger, a man named Curtis Boone, who worked nights as a subcontracted security guard, including, it turned out, at a record storage annex connected to the billing company where I worked. Curtis liked to talk when he'd been drinking, and over 3 separate rides in October, he mentioned a woman in billing who kept flagging discrepancies. He mentioned that she rode with a driver every night around 11. He mentioned once, slurred and almost proud of himself, that he knew exactly which house on the block was hers because he had followed the app pin home himself just to see. Gideon did not tell me any of this yet. He told me later that he had learned the hard way, after a warehouse he once guarded was robbed while he dismissed a warning sign as nothing, that when something felt wrong, you did not wait to be sure. You watched. You wrote it down. You waited for the moment you could act instead of only worry. That moment came on a Tuesday in December. Cold enough that the tea in the thermos had gone lukewarm by the time I got in the car. I handed Gideon his cup as always, expecting the familiar right turn 2 blocks ahead. Instead, he drove straight through the intersection. "Gideon," I said, "you missed my street." He did not answer right away. His hands were tight on the wheel, 10 and 2, like he was bracing against something. "I need you to stay calm. Ruth," he finally said, "and I need you to trust me for the next 10 minutes. My stomach folded in on itself. "Where are we going?" I asked. "Somewhere we can talk without anyone watching your house while we do it," he said. He pulled into the empty lot of a shuttered hardware store and cut the engine. In the sudden quiet, he turned to face me fully for the first time in 3 months of rides. "Do you know a man named Curtis Boone?" he asked. I did not by name, but something cold moved through me anyway. "I have processed a file with that name on it," I said slowly. "Security contractor, night shift." "Why?" Gideon exhaled. "Because I have been driving him for 6 weeks," he said. "And 3 nights ago he told me, without knowing what I do for a living, that he followed your app pin home and confirmed your address for someone he only called the boss." The world went very quiet. "What does that mean?" I whispered. "It means," Gideon said, "that someone above him is worried about what you've been writing down at work, and they sent him to find out where you live and whether you keep any of it at home." "I do not," I said, my voice shaking. "Everything stays locked in the office." "I know," he said, "but he does not believe that. And 2 nights ago, before I picked you up, I drove past your house on my own time. His truck was parked across the street, engine running, lights off. My hands would not stop trembling. That does not prove anything," I said. Even as I said it, I did not believe it. Gideon reached into his jacket and pulled out his phone, showing me a notes app filled with dates, times, license plates, fragments of things Curtis had said, word for word, the way he had trained himself to listen and remember from years of night work. "I watched him get out of the truck 2 nights ago," Gideon said quietly. "I watched him walk up to your porch. I watched him try your door. I could not breathe. He tried my door," I repeated. "He did not get in," Gideon said. "Your deadbolt held. But he stood there a long time, like he was deciding whether to come back with something to force it." Tears blurred my vision. "Why are you telling me this now?" I asked. "Because I am not driving you home tonight," Gideon said. "We are going to the police." At the precinct, an officer with tired eyes took down everything: my job, the flag claims, Denise's warning, the truck outside my house. Then Gideon laid his phone on the table, and a detective who introduced herself as Officer Reyes went very still while she read through 6 weeks of dated, time-stamped notes. "Curtis Boone works contract security for 3 facilities tied to your company's record storage," Reyes said finally. "He has keys. Limited access. Enough to move around after hours without setting off an alarm. That is how the files got altered without anyone noticing," I said slowly, understanding landing on me like a physical weight. He was not breaking in anywhere. He already belonged there. They executed a warrant on Curtis Boone's apartment and storage unit 2 days later. Investigators found altered claim records going back over a year, patient information sold to a data broker, and settlement adjustments quietly siphoning small amounts from elderly patients' accounts. Amounts too small for any one person to fight over, but large enough, multiplied across hundreds of files, to matter a great deal to whoever was behind it. In his truck, they found printed photographs of my house, my porch, my back door, a note with my name, my work schedule, and a single word beside a date that had not yet come. Contingency. I sat in that hearing room weeks later and listened to a prosecutor read that word out loud, and I understood, in a way I never had before, how close an ordinary Tuesday had come to being the last one I ever lived through. Curtis Boone pleaded guilty to fraud, unauthorized computer access, and attempted unlawful entry. And the man who had been directing him, a mid-level manager at the billing company who had been quietly building a second income off vulnerable patients for 2 years, was indicted alongside him. The verdict, when it finally came, felt less like relief and more like a door closing on something that had been standing open far longer than I ever knew. Gideon still drives nights. I still ride in the back for now, though he tells me I am welcome up front whenever I am ready. We have dinner most Sundays, him, his daughter, and me, in a kitchen that no longer feels 3 sizes too large. His daughter calls me Miss Ruth and brings her own thermos now, chamomile, she says, because Gideon told her it was tradition. I think often about how ordinary that Tuesday looked from the outside. A woman getting into a car. A cup of tea passed through the front seat. Nothing about it looked like the difference between a life and its ending. But it was. Kindness did not save me because it was magic. It saved me because it built a habit of paying attention. And paying attention is what let one man notice what everyone else had trained themselves not to see. We live in a world that teaches us to keep our heads down, to treat the people who serve us as background noise instead of neighbors. I am telling you this because I do not want you to learn that lesson the way I almost did. Be kind to the people you see every week, even the ones whose names you almost forget to ask. You never know whose quiet warning might be the only thing standing between you, and a door you should never have opened. I gave my night driver tea every week, and one night, he missed my exit and said the words that saved my life. This was my true story from Cleveland. What lesson did you take from this story? And where are you watching from tonight? Tell me your city in the comments.